Nick Adolphson here from the Maine Christian Civic League. I have the privilege, the opportunity today to be in the studio with my grandfather, Arthur Adolphson. And Grandpa's not quite 90. I'm going to give you a little bit of his biography, and then we're just going to talk. But I wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One is I think it's really important for us as a people, for us as families, to remember where we came from, to remember kind of the foundation that we're built on, the importance of faith, the importance of family, the importance of our identity as a community and as Mainers. I also think his story has a lot to teach us, and we're not gonna do a careful biography this morning as much as just tell stories. But I think there's a couple things that I want us to pull out of this conversation, and one of them is this: that redemption is always possible. Second, that our Maine identity is a powerful identity, and I think we've begun to lose that as a society and as a culture. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that Maine identity is, and then the last thing that I think is really important for us to talk about is that a life matters, and over the course of a lifetime, we can see huge change in a positive or in a negative direction, and a life can have such a huge impact on that. And so without further ado, I'm going to jump into the biography, a quick biography of the man who, for me, shaped what being a Mainer is, what being a hard worker is. He shaped my dad and my uncles and all of the men that really have been my mentors over the years. And so, Grandpa, welcome to the Maine Christian Civic League studio here this morning.
Well, thank you.
So really quick, I'm going to give your biography, and then we're gonna jump into some questions. So, born in 1936, just a few short years ago, August 9th, right? I get that right? 1936. For most of your life, was the son of a single mom. You grew up in Rockland, Maine, what I would call the old Rockland, a Rockland that looks a little different. You worked in Main Street businesses, local businesses, for your whole childhood. Spent a lot of time at Camp Bombazine, the Boy Scouts. Went into the Coast Guard as a very young man, 17 years old, and then into the U.S. Army. Spent time in Ethiopia as a radio guy. Came back to Maine, and then never really left. Raised a family here, 6 kids, a girl, and 5 boys. All kinds of grandkids. Now, many, many great grandkids. Have always resided either in Rockland, Union, or Hope, and continue to live there in Hope with my grandmother, Jean, who you've been married to for almost 70 years. I think 70 years next year, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's the really quick biography. What I want to do is start with your childhood, though. I want to, and don't feel like you got to do anything chronological here. I just want some stories. So can you give me just a couple of your earliest memories of growing up in the little city of Rockland? In fact, you told me one the other day of sledding down through, I don't know which street it was, Warren Street maybe, right through the doors of the A&P grocery. But tell me a couple of those early stories of Rockland.
Well, the first one, the start of it all, I was born in Knox Hospital, which is no longer a hospital. And my mother and I were there for 7 days, according to the paperwork. And the total bill was $55.79. So I always figured I wasn't worth too much.
Either that, or we've got a health system crisis. I feel like we could steer off here and talk about the cost of health care. Yeah. $55 for 7 days. That's pretty good.
Beyond that, my memory, of course, doesn't take effect till I get up to about close to 3 years old, and then my mother and father, we lived on Warren Street in Rockland. He had a trash business with 2 small dump trucks, and ran all over the county delivering firewood and delivering groceries and delivering whatever people needed done. And he decided, he was also an alcoholic. He decided he didn't like Maine anymore because it was all mostly winters. So he took off one night on Christmas Eve. And I was 3.5 years old. We stood in the old Chisholm Spa doorway. That's where the Bible bookstore used to be, was at one time. And Christmas Eve, about 5 o'clock, and he didn't show up, so Mother gave up, and we walked up to Warren Street, where we lived in an apartment up, and had a note from him that he'd left. That was it. He took a brand new Buick and all the cash. And so Mother had to fend for herself from then on. I remember her saying, "That's it for me, and I'm done with them." And so she went on her own, was a secretary all her life, all the rest of her life.
So you grew up in Rockland with a single mom.
Yeah.
But I know, and you've modeled what strong manhood is. So talk to me about some of your, maybe your first job, or some of the stories of the men and women in Rockland that really had a big impact on you over the years.
Well, the biggest impact came from my mother's brothers, the Curtis brothers, that were all in one business. Most of them were lobstermen, fishermen. And they took care of me while my mother worked. And
so did you say they were lobstermen?
Yes.
I know there was down on the Gig River. Did you fish?
Yeah.
I've never asked you this question. How did they fish? When you were a lobsterman,
Okay.
then, was it all by hand? Like, what was the...
No, it was a lobster. And Maynard and Bert were the lobstermen. And Elma, who lived in Ash Point, was a contractor at the time, but they were together on a fish weir in the Gig River. And it was a big one. And I was between 8 and 12 years old. I worked with them every year on the fish weir. And I would drive the horse to haul out the weir stakes and the brush during the winter. And then in the summer, I'd help them bring stuff down to put in the weir and putting the brush into the leaders of the weir. And they would be fishing for, sardines.
Okay.
Over the years in the mouth of the Gig River. And the boats would come in when there was a market for them. They would bring the big boats in a small boat called a pumper, and it would pump the sardines out of the weir basket into the ship, and the ship would take it to the factories. When there wasn't any market in the factories, a truck would come with a big containers in it, and we would fill the dories, 25-foot dories full of hard sardines. My cousin and I, he'd be in one end of the dory, I'd be in the other, and we'd be right awash with the sea level, and the boat would be full of sardines, and we'd take it closer to the shore, and then we'd fill the baskets, and men would carry the sardines up to the truck and dump them. And
Okay. So the ship taking it? Sorry, now you got me distracted into sardines. But was the ship taking it to the factories in Rockland?
Yes, Rockland.
So basically moving it from South Thomas and over to Rockland?
Yeah, the ships were taking it to the factories,
Okay.
wherever they may be.
Okay.
There was more than Rockland, but I'm not sure where. So.
Okay. So I read a recent headline about Rockland was that the city council voted to not allow Rockland law enforcement to cooperate with federal immigration officials.
Oh,
There's lots of different stories I read about Rockland now, and it's a very different one
Yes, it is.
than the one you tell stories about. So
Yeah.
tell me the story about the sled ride down from Warren Street into the grocery store. But then tell us a couple stories about working on Main Street and just the people and personalities and kind of what you did and experienced there.
When I was, I don't know, about in the 3rd grade or so, we went to Tyler School, which is no longer there on Warren Street. And in the wintertime, the kids from the whole neighborhood all the way around, we would slide on Warren Street, and the city of Rockland would block it off at both ends so we could slide there. But when it was open, they would try to sand it, but us kids would go along behind the sander and cover it up with snow so we could still slide. And we'd be out there at the street lights at night, all the little kids, and the big kids would take care of the little kids. And there was one fellow that had a toboggan that it had a big bell and a steering wheel, and it would hold 18 bodies. And they wouldn't let the smaller kids like me at the time on there. But one of them grabbed me and stuck me in between him and another fellow up in front. And there was a whole mess of us on that thing, ringing the bell, going down Warren Street on that sleigh, and went right across Main Street and in the door of a little grocery store. So that was fun. Yeah.
What was your, now you worked in one of the grocery stores downtown. What was your first job downtown that wasn't fishing with your uncles?
Well, my first job wasn't an official job, but I worked in a hardware store when I was 12 years old. Just above the ferry terminal was a Bicknell's Hardware, and I used to go in there and I'd sweep the floors and do this and do that. But then my next time was I worked on Main Street all the time. I was growing up and in high school, and I got a paper route after that, and I had the best paper route in town. And then the Courier-Gazette decided to bring me in the building and work in the building, and I was a printer's devil for a while. And then,
all right, a printer's devil. No one else is. No one in my generation has heard that. That's an actual thing they called you, right? A printer's devil.
Yeah, the printer's devil in the big machines that they would sit and type, and all the lead would run up and down these runners, and the letters would go off. Oh, it was just a conglomeration of everything. And I would carry the lead trays around to the different operators, and I'd keep the floor clean, and I'd get rid of the old papers and put new ones in certain places. And then after that, I worked in Newberry's, which is a 5 and dime store. It's on the corner where the museum has taken over the building, and that was a national company, the Newberry chain. I worked there 4 years while I was from the 8th grade through a junior in high school. And then in the senior in high school, I worked at the A&P store, which was Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, which is no longer around, I guess. And that building is where the sports store is on Main Street in the area that used to be called the Brook, because the sewers and everything went under the highway there, and they called that the Brook area. But I worked in that A&P store, and one night they worked till 6 o'clock, and I worked every night after school and all summer. And one night the manager asked me to go down cellar and get a big carton of vegetables that he had to deliver to somebody. I don't know where, but I noticed smoke at the back end of the cellar. And I went back to see what it was, and it was a big box of Scratch Anywhere matches. And so I picked that up, and I threw it out the back door of the store, which was all dirt floor and everything. But I went out, and there was a stick there, so I poked the box with a stick, and the flame immediately burst out. So I always figured I probably saved half of Rockland.
It was all mostly wooden buildings back then, right?
Yeah, mostly wooden buildings, and it was right where the sports store is now on Main Street.
So I think we probably got a whole bunch more stories from that era. But so you started working. You knew from between Newberry's and A&P and the hardware store.
Knew everybody.
Knew everybody in that community, right?
You knew everybody on Main Street. I remember I used to buy my clothes and stuff at Gregory's clothing store, which was also the Boy Scout store. And our Boy Scout master, our troop master, worked there, so that was always interesting. Okay. One time when I was 8 years old, which was kind of comical, I was walking along Main Street, and I had a police whistle, and I was blowing that whistle. Well, the police chief, the chief of police heard me, And he come over and he grabbed me by the shoulder, he says, by my nickname, and says, "You come with me, young fella. You're not supposed to be blowing that whistle on Main Street." So he took me to the jail, which was right next to the fire station and where the museum parking lot is. And he called up my mother. He set me in on a jail cell, and he says, "How you like it? How's that feel in there?" He says, he called my mother up and says, "Irene, I've got your son in jail down here. What do you want me to do with him?" She says, "Well, shut the gate and lock it." So that was fun, because he knew me real well because I played with his son.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you encountered law enforcement one other time, didn't you, when you were about that age? You and a friend took a walk someplace. I'm trying to remember where it was. You guys go hitchhiking or something like that?
Oh no, we were only 5 years old at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, me and a friend of mine, we hitchhiked. We escaped from my caretakers, and we hitchhiked to Camden. And we actually got a couple of rides, and down the waterfront road in Camden that runs down to Rockport.
Yeah.
There was a fire hydrant wide open. We played in that for a while. And finally a guy come along in a Central Maine truck, and he found us. He picked us up and took us back to Rockland. They were looking for us. But
so no law enforcement there, just
no law enforcement.
Good citizens.
No. In fact, the guy that picked us up and took us back to Rockland, in later years when I was in my 20s, he gave me a test for ham radio license, and I passed that. So that was the same guy that saved us.
That's funny. Before we move from high school into adulthood, there's a story I remember you telling about the use of fireworks one summer when you were a teenager, and a subsequent law that was passed here in the state of Maine. Is that a story? Maybe I'm remembering it in an exaggerated way, but I seem to recall you and some friends using fireworks in a...
Well, we lived on Grove Street in front of the old Rockland High School, and there was 2 or 3 of us that had these rockets, not rockets really, but these things that just go out and they go way up high and explode. We used to lay them down the street and shoot them towards the high school. We did have to stop that for some reason, but I can't really remember who the reason was. So.
Okay. So you're in high school. Tell me about when you met Grammy and what ensued next.
Well, the old Rockland High School, which was a wonderful place, my mother worked there. She made sure that I did things right, even though I was late most every day. Well, I lived 3 houses from it. But anyway, you collected outside the school before 8 o'clock, and there'd be like 400 kids show up waiting for the bell to ring. Well, there was these 3 girls walking up the sidewalk, had no idea who they were, and was over on the other side. And gosh, that middle one looked awful pretty, and I poked my friend that was with me and says, "I'm going to marry that girl." I never even met her, but I did. I married her. I did, yep.
You married her in
1957.
56.
Yeah, 56. You're right.
Yep.
56. Yep.
1956, and from there, you got married and you left to head overseas, right?
So I was in the Army at the time. I got transferred from the Coast Guard Reserve into the Army Security Agency, and I got married while I was in the Army at my sister's house. And then after that, I was shipped overseas to East Africa and into the country of Ethiopia for 2 years. So, and because I had been in the reserve for 3 years, and then in the Army for 1, and I was a corporal, that made me eligible to bring my family over. So I brought my new wife over to East Africa, and we spent a year there together and roaming the countryside. So.
If Grammy was here, I'd get her to tell the stories of, because you were there before her, and she, I remember as a little kid hearing her stories of riding over on a
freighter.
Some sort of freighter,
Yeah,
right?
big freighter, yeah.
They had some huge storms in the North Atlantic. She's a 17-year-old girl, or
Yeah,
maybe 18 at the time.
They went through a hurricane off the Azores, and she was in the ship for 22 days, and I went down and picked her up at the port of Massawa on the Red Sea. Yeah.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about, you don't need to tell about your intel work. I'm sure you had lots of clearances, and I'm sure it's
Well, that's all gone over with now.
All gone and over with now.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about Ethiopia. I know while you were there, you found some missionaries and you did some work with them.
Yeah.
You did a lot of riding motorcycles on the mountains. And
Yeah.
tell us a few of those stories and how they kind of, stories that shaped you and helped.
It doesn't seem possible, but being in a military situation, it was a wonderful 2 years. I was in the Morse Code Intercept. We worked for the National Security Agency out of Washington. We were all top secret, cleared personnel at the time. And there was 300 of us in that company, and then there was another 300 that ran the military base. They were there for us. They took care of the base and all the support and protection and all that. Well, as long as we were not on duty, we could go anywhere in the country we wanted to. We had free passes throughout the empire of Ethiopia. And the first year, I did a lot of motorcycle riding, and we traveled the whole country on motorcycles, me and 4 or 5 other Christians that had motorcycles, and we would go from mission station to mission station, and there was 3 child orphanages there, and we used to go and help them with buildings and sometimes food. And there was one big one who's the pastor that ran the children's home, and his wife came from Canada, and his wife was one of the family of the headmaster at New Brunswick Bible Institute.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so one of the GIs from the Midwest got his church to send a 60-foot windmill to the East Africa for that school, and it was a water pump to put on their well. And we went down and helped them install the water pump. And the missionary, who was about 6'6", and his wife was 5'9", he was a big fella. And when we get the tower all up, he put that 200-pound windmill motor on his shoulder and walked up the corner of the tower and put it on its mount. And,
my goodness.
Then another time we were at that orphanage, there was 4 of us were putting down cement tiles in a big room they had. It was just a dirt floor, and we put down these 1-foot square cement tiles. There was black, white, and red. Well, we laid all those tiles down real nice, had a nice floor in that building, and then we washed the cement dust off. And in the middle of the white tile, which was most of the floor, was a black one. And they had black and red stripes around. They were nice. But we had one black tile out in the middle. You couldn't tell the difference with all the cement dust on it. So, so that was they laughed about that. That was their memory of the GIs.
So they kept it.
Yeah.
They kept their tile.
And then when my wife got over there, missionaries in the capital of Addis Ababa, they needed a car, so they got a hold of the GIs, which were up in Eritrea, and asked us to, the Christian group, asked us to find them a decent car. So we went out and we found a year-old Opel station wagon, beautiful automobile, and we made arrangements for the money from different churches to buy the car for them. And Jean and I volunteered to drive the car to Addis, which was 600 miles south. And so we loaded the car up with extra gas and different things, and we had a map with all the mission stations all the way down. So we stayed the first night we had to stay at a hotel, And I got 10-day leave to make the trip. Actually, I had to use 5 days of the leave, but we had 10 days. So.
Mm-hmm.
And we headed south. The first night we stayed in a hotel out in the middle of nowhere, and you walk in and there's Arabs sitting around the table and the fans going slow and, you know, all having tea because there's no alcohol. They wouldn't drink alcohol. And we stayed that hotel that night. And then every other night, it took, 9 days, I think. We stayed at different mission stations all the way along. And we went through Mussolini Tunnel and the, up 12,000 feet. And that was one day. And then the next day we went up another 10,000-foot mountain. And then finally we got on the plateau of where Addis Ababa is, which is a high, up 10,000 feet or so, 8 or 10. And we delivered the car to the mission station, and we rode around 3 or 4 days. And I bought a big monkey rug.
I was going to ask if that's the trip where you bought the rug. You bought a monkey rug and a leopard.
Yeah.
Did you buy a leopard skin too?
Yeah, a leopard skin. Yeah, I sat for 12 hours dickering for that monkey rug. It was 8 feet across. It had, I don't know how many monkey skins in it.
So this is where African tribal culture meets Yankee dickering. Is that what's going?
Right.
Is that what's going on? 12 hours is a long time.
I got it for $35 eventually.
How many monkeys in that rug?
Oh, I can't remember. There was around 18, I think.
Okay.
Monkey skins. Yeah.
And those are monkeys that are that I believe, if I recall the rug, which I think is all, you had too many grandkids, so now it's all torn apart. But I think those were endangered species. They are now endangered species.
Now, yeah. Columbus monkeys.
Columbus, okay.
Yeah,
black and white.
Black and white cape, yeah. And then we, time to go home, so I had arrangements lined up with the Air Force. They made a weekly trip to Addis from Asmara, where we were stationed, and it was a C-47 airplane, and they made a weekly trip for the legal papers, going back and forth to the.
All this stuff that you were listening to on the radio, they had to move back and forth, other things?
That wasn't for that.
Okay.
That was for diplomatic papers from the.
Okay.
From that, they made a weekly trip. I took that trip 3 times, so I made 3 trips to Addis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before we move on from Ethiopia, I seem to recall a camels running around the desert story.
Oh.
That I feel like you gotta tell.
That's when I had the motorcycles, and there was 3 of us decided to go camp overnight on the Red Sea, and we were up 8,000 feet altitude up in the mountains, and the Red Sea, of course, was about 40 miles of desert, 120 degrees temperature from the bottom of the mountain to the sea. So we decided to get down the mountain in the first place, it was 42 hairpin turns down the mountain, and we'd shut the engines off on the motorbikes and coast the whole way. And then when you get to the desert, we'd start the engines up. But anyway, we decided to go across the desert and go further up in the Red Sea, where there was an old World War II cement building. Nothing in it. We could sleep in there. And crossing the desert, we come across a camel train. There was 15 camels tied all together. They had salt. You can see this on the internet. You can look up that. You can see where they're putting salt on the camels, and then this was a camel train that was headed for South Sudan, because it came out of the Ogaden Desert, which was in Eritrea, Ethiopia, and the camel train was headed for the South Sudan. Well, the motorcycle scared the camels, and they broke the ropes. So here's 15 camels running all over the desert, and 3 somewhat angry natives. We put the natives on back of a motorcycle, so we run around the desert rounding up the camels. So we got them all together after about an hour and a half. And we left laughing. We couldn't speak a word what they spoke, but we all laughed and left good humor. But for a moment there, I was standing holding 2 camels by the muzzle, right, by the ropes, while they were hooking up the other ones. I was standing in soft sand and holding on those camels and looking and wondering if maybe I'm 2,000 years gone somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, and who knew you'd go from rounding up 15 camels in the desert to head home and then have 6 kids, 5 boys in particular, all in a row, and just a handful of years. So you and Grammy were there for a couple of years, and you came home, and you chose to stay in Maine. And I know over the next probably decade, you had a number of opportunities to leave the state.
Yeah.
Tell me why you decided to stay in Maine.
Well, I'd been halfway around the world and through all the states on the northeast coast, and I didn't see anything else I wanted. I decided to stay here where I knew everybody. I knew the way of life and how to live it at its fullest. And a lot of Christian people that it was so easy to get along. So I decided to stick around this area.
Yeah. So you made a choice then to choose the life that you wanted over the promise of money or the cool opportunities. You decided that was more important, which I think is just it's good for me because I'm part of the product of that choice that you made.
Yeah.
But
I started out as a photographer. I studied it when I was overseas. I took a photography course, and I did a lot of that stuff. So when I got home, I immediately got a job, actually before I got out of the Army, because I was back in Fort Devens for 9 months. So I had the opportunity to get to know Rockland as it had changed over the time I'd gone. And I decided to stick with it. And I got a job as a photographer, at the school photographer. For 16 years I worked at it until I got tired of putting on 70,000, 80,000 miles a year and decided to get into the earthwork business. And so I did. I dove into that and worked at that for 28 years or so. Yeah. So
tell us a little bit about those years taking pictures, because you just said you did 70 or 80,000 miles a year. You drove, I know for some of the time you had a Volkswagen Bug, and I don't know what other kinds of cars you drove.
Oh.
But you must have seen Maine, and I talk a lot at the league about the fact that we've lost in the recent decades. We've lost a lot of the Maine that we knew, a lot of the kind of values that built us. And so, tell us a little bit about the Maine that you saw in those 16 years as you traveled around.
I worked for Jura Studios, and I ended up doing all of the scheduling of the many schools we had. We ended up with like 260,000 kids we took pictures of in 3 states. And we ended up mostly with Maine and some of New Hampshire. But you'd wear a car out in those days, and at 80,000 miles, which was about a year and a half of that business. And so I had a new car about every year and a half, and I got paid mileage. And cars, well, I could buy a brand new sedan, like a brand new Dodge sedan with all the trimmings for $1,400, and it didn't take long on all the mileage to get a new car every year and a half or so. The trouble is, that's habit forming. But we did in northern Maine quite a bit, up in a roof stick. And one time, I had a 4-wheel drive Land Rover that I could use to get in the wintertime, so I headed for Greenville. And we'd had a bad storm the night before, and I couldn't find any news or anything. It was closed. I get up far as Monson, and the snow was so deep, the power lines were covered up from the snow blowers that blow in snow from Dow Air Force Base. They had to try to unplug the roads, and people had tunnels through to their, and I got to thinking about that. I couldn't get out to Greenville because they were snowed in for 10 days. But anyway, that got to me thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this, putting up with all this stuff? And so that next spring, I started looking into the earthwork business.
Okay.
And got out of the teaching. And they wanted me to, they came from Alston Studios, which was another company, and asked me to take over Alston Studios for them in Maine and New Hampshire. I turned them down. I didn't want anything to do with it. So got into the earthwork business.
Put enough miles on. Now, at that point, and we could tell stories all day. In fact, someday I'll get like Dad and Uncle Glenn and a couple others on and tell stories of their pets, because the triumph and tragedy of the pets that happened at your house was amazing. But you got into the earthwork business, I know in part because you had 5 boys, and you knew, boy, I'm going to have to do something to keep these guys out of trouble, and you put them to work. But you made a decision at some point in there that you had bought an old farmhouse, and you bought a piece of property on a lake in Maine. And property on a lake in Maine is almost untouchable now. It's you're gonna be looking at 7 figures if you want to get a nice piece of property on a lake. But tell me about buying that property and why you bought it, because I think it's still significant in my life and in my kids' life. And so just tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, during the earthwork, I was buying gravel off one of the old farmers in the area. Had a nice little gravel pit. And one day he asked me, he said, would you like to have a little piece of lake property? And I said, well, yeah, I'd love to at least talk about it, see it, look it over. And so Mr. Merrifield, he ended up selling me approximately 75 acres of land at the end of a defunct road. And I bought it, and we've matured it ever since. So
slowly you built the road up.
Then I sold my original place, and which a couple of the boys are still domiciled on that property.
Yeah.
And
so this isn't for me to tell stories, but I'm going to. So that property then became really a gathering place.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth highlighting just for a second. You told right at the beginning of this that Christmas Eve in 1939 or 40, when your father left, there were just 2 Adolphsons left in this whole area. And something that happened with that property is it became this place of hospitality. And my dad's stories as a boy growing up there involved all his cousins and people camping there. And my years as a boy, I remember the year I was 13 years old, I think every day, me and my cousin Sam and my friend Jonathan, we got on our bikes and we were at the camp swimming, and now pretty regularly on the weekends, my brothers, a few of my cousins will all take our kids down, and we sleep. We'll camp out. We'll eat breakfast over the fire and all that stuff. And there's something powerful about that. It's not the property, but the hospitality around the property that brought and kept a family together. And I think I'm going to have you tell a couple more stories, but I just wanted to stop and highlight that, because I think we miss that sometimes. We live in this world that doesn't have a sense of place anymore, right? Because everything's online and it's all over, and that was really served as a sense of place for our family. And if I went home right now and said out loud, I'm going to head to the cottage, I would have 4 of my, actually probably all 5 of my children going, well, I'm coming, just in case something fun was going to happen. Yeah. And so you bought that cottage property. You had other businesses over the years. I know you ran an Agway store, because that was the first place I ever got to work as a 5-year-old kid in your Agway store.
That was so big. That was so bad, I forgot about it.
Not everything can be a success, right? Yeah. So I don't know if this is a question or more of a statement, but again, at the beginning, you told a story about your dad going, but when you were probably 40, somewhere in your late 40s, early 50s, you made a trip to California. Tell me a little bit about why you. So just for some context, Graham, you probably don't even understand this, but in my generation, if somebody slights our generation or abandons us, we write them off. They deserve no respect. They deserve no. And that's not right, but that's how our generation treats it. Yeah. So tell us why. Tell us why you made a trip to California and.
The first time I went out, my father called. He would call about once a year just to keep in touch. He was a lifelong alcoholic, and he was a metallurgist for Lockheed Aircraft during the war and retired from there. And he wanted me to come out. He said on the phone, "I'm really sorry, I wish I'd never left," this type of deal. But he wanted me to come out, so we decided to. I had working for myself, I could take the time, and we went out, and he was in the process of trading cars, and I helped him get the car he wanted, and he had an old Cadillac, and he gave that to us, and we drove it back, which wasn't, it was pretty much gone, but we drove home in it, and then that took care of the first visit ever, after all those years. And then 3 or 4 months later, or maybe it was over a year, his wife passed away. And he was an alcoholic. And the, who was it? The police chief called me from Huntington Beach and told me that my father really needed some help. His wife was dead, and he thought she was buried, but she wasn't buried yet, so we made a quick trip out there and cleaned that all up and straightened it out, and then headed back home. And then another couple of years, the chief of police called again, and he said, "Well, your father's in the hospital. He had fallen and broken something." So that was all downhill from there. So we ended up in a 10-day period of getting him into a 7-day nursing home, taking care of all his debts, selling his trailer, getting his bank accounts transferred into an account in Camden, and rented a motorhome, bought a trailer, put his car on the trailer, and we spent 72 hours from Long Beach, California to Rockport Hospital. We dropped him right off at the hospital on the way home. So, and then after that, it was just in and out of nursing home and hospital, and finally he passed away. So,
So you took the time as a son, and I have to believe it's partially your faith, right? But partially also the duty that you were taught growing up. And one thing we didn't even touch on that we should have, because I know it was a big part of your life as a kid, but in the Boy Scouts, right? You spent years at Camp Bombazine and with men and counselors at that camp who were World War II vets, but that sense of duty, and doesn't really matter if I've been slighted or if there's something unjust that happened. He's my dad, so I'm going to take care of him.
There was nobody, like I called the lawyer, his lawyer, and I said, "Well, what am I going to do? How do I do all this stuff?" He says, "Don't worry about a thing. Just do it all. Transfer his funds, take him, sell his trailer." He says, "You're his only heir. There's nobody that can contest it." So I just went ahead and did all that and solved the problems. So, and it took us 72 hours to get home, and after that he ended up in the nursing home for, I don't know, a year or so, and then he passed away. So.
Well, I got to meet him as a little guy. I remember meeting him on your way back, actually. I remember going up in the motorhome and meeting him, and he wasn't out he wasn't really
That's right,
awake, but you stopped at the Agway
we
store.
stopped at the Agway store.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
that failure, the business failure. So I want to just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. We could probably talk all day with stories and all that, but I won't keep you here that long. You've got now a fourth generation coming behind you, and probably relatively soon there'll be another, right? But you've got lots and lots. I don't even know how many great grandkids you have. Lots and lots of great grandkids. Do you have a piece of advice for your grandkids and your great grandkids that have a lot of life left ahead of them, that a good lesson that you've learned that you want them to learn, besides going to the Coast Guard, because you told all of us that, and that's another thing I miss, is the almost 40 years, right, in the Coast Guard reserves.
40.4.
Okay, so more than 40 years.
Army and Coast Guard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. 40.4 years. I don't know where they went. The snap of the fingers and it was gone.
Good years. Any brilliant advice? If you don't have any, it's all right. I have a lot of brilliant advice from you that I'm living my life based on. But
there's 4 homes on that property now. I hope, and I'm not demanding, I hope that what's left stays in the family. That's all. Yeah. You're coming to the point where you're going to have to make the decisions and not me. So that's why I put the lake property in all the names, so that they could fight over it themselves. They wouldn't have to involve me in it to do what is best with it.
Yeah.
So we did sell one piece of property out of the family, mainly because the cash. We needed a little bit of money other than my retirement. So
I mean, taxes and hope. But,
yeah, taxes.
So, but it really is, and this is the thread all throughout everything we've talked about, and it's family first. You make a decision for your family before you make a decision for the money you might make or the career.
It's the only way it's going to last if you don't do stuff like that. So
yeah, no, that's good. I think I want to just close with this, and this isn't really even a question, but this is something that when we were talking a couple of months ago, and Sam was up, and he said this, and it got me really thinking. But we're working right now nationally on celebrating our nation's 250th anniversary, right? 2026 will be 250 years as a nation. And that sounds like a really long time. But when I think about the fact that you are almost 90, you've been alive for more than 1/3 of our nation's existence. And it's only a couple more generations, and people you knew could have known people in the Revolutionary War. And one of the lessons that I take from your life and how you've lived, and from kind of what you built, because it wasn't a financial thing you built, it was a family, and it was people of character to impact the world. But one of the things I take from that is, I think we look at Maine, and too often right now we think it's gone, it's lost, we're never going to get it back. A lifetime makes a huge difference.
yeah.
And for me, remembering that I've got a whole lifetime, and it goes fast, but it's also, God willing, can be long, and it can give you lots of opportunity to impact and to see change happen.
There's a good example of the change happening, and that's Rockland itself. It is nothing like it was when I was a kid. You walk down Main Street and you would know everybody. You'd know all the store owners. They'd all know you. And there's nothing like that anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's not because it's bigger, right? Because it was actually bigger population-wise when you were a kid than it is now, if I'm not mistaken, or around the same size.
Yeah, probably around the same size. I don't know really. There's so many new houses, it makes a big difference. So.
Yeah. Well, Graham, like I said, I know I could keep you for a long time, and we won't. But I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for you and Grammy, and for your example, for holding really working to hold together a family, but also giving us an example of what it looks like. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you do got to keep going and you keep doing the work. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful for the stories you've told today, and I really enjoyed it. And so thank you for coming on.
Yeah, glad to do it.